Grounding for Starseed Survivors, Cosmic Influence, the Anunnaki, and Earth Healing. This is a discussion about trauma-informed mysticism, cosmic lore, and elemental magic. In this episode, we'll take a look at modern grounding tools, ancient knowledge, and how you can utilize these for a spiritual level of healing to pull in divine wisdom both for yourself and the planet. This is the Rain Free Podcast. These audio teachings are an extension of the Sovereign Rain Healing Community. Tune in to break out. Streaming now on YouTube, Spotify, and in our very own Lumist app. All right, guys. Hello. Welcome back to Rain Free. Today, we're going to talk about grounding for starseeds, earth energy, and a nervous system reset. We'll take a look at how to work with the concepts of grounding from a more cosmic perspective and build off of a Mesopotamian creation story of the Anunnaki and step into cosmic consciousness and what that looks like to ground that into a planet during a time of instability and how you might work with these concepts or explore these concepts, develop new processes for yourself. So right now, we have a lot of instability within the United States, but I, I think globally as well. And astrologically, cosmologically, this is really explainable from some of the planetary positions right now. So we have, I believe, Neptune and Uranus, both in retrograde and both in Aries, which is a strong sign about taking action. So a lot of heavy influence there in the house of Aries, as well as Mars squaring Venus. So Mars being our planet archetype of war, and Mercury also just went into retrograde, and Mercury is going to be your archetypal planet for communication. So if you look at those placements right now and the nature of the rotations relative to Earth with the retrograde aspects, it is a deep time of reflection and it's a very strong in your face energy. So it makes it really undeniable. So, what that really starts to create is a lot of discomfort. It forces people or a collective into looking at their shadows. You can't avoid it anymore. So, when we get into these levels of instability, a lot of times there's an extreme. You're going to get an extreme in this case towards transhumanism, and you see that with AI and the level of technologies that we have in development, and even quantum computing coming behind AI. Then on the other extreme, you have your pure naturalism. And what do we do? What do you do if you believe in cosmic influence on a planet during a time of these heavy instabilities and archetypal placements? How do we work with that? What do we do? Where can we look for some guidance? So, regardless of whether or not you're transhumanism or you're looking at natural ways to help influence the earth as she maybe is splitting along some spiritual timelines, or maybe recognize that like the forever chemicals, the glyphosate, um, and how it's influenced the soil, how it's influenced our own biology. What level of knowledge and consciousness has that depleted is one way to look at that, maybe. So the questions kind of become what role do you want to take in the new creation story as these systems, biological or systemic, start to adapt, evolve technology wise, or change? And how do you stay healthy during a time of profound transformation that's really demanding you to take action on that transformation as well? So, to explore this a little bit more, we're going to look at the Mesopotamian creation records. These would be the clay tablets. The Hasis has a really good resource. I'll drop that in the description. So if you want to kind of go back and read the translations for yourself, that'll be linked below. We explored it in the last episode, Time Loops of Injustice, from more of the perspective of dragon energy and dragon magic, and looking at how that feminine energy played a role throughout ancient history and Greek mythos. So that was kind of a cool look at a totally different angle on time loops. And when we step over here and look at the Anunnaki from a creation story of understanding grounding or grounding cosmic consciousness, we can look at it a little bit differently, but we'll still need to understand who the Anunnaki are. So, the Anunnaki are a race of beings, the Anuna, and then Ki being the ancient name for Earth. So, we would use Gaia more in modern times to reference ancient Earth. But when you go back and look at ancient Earth history and some of the more native tribes all around the world or these clay tablets, you'll see the name Ki, Ki. And before that, you could make a couple parallels with Taimate. But when we look at Ki being the designation for ancient Earth, the beings are the Anuna, Ki, the Anuna stationed at Ki, the Anunnaki. They had a god, Anu, who was the dad of Enki and Enlil. These are two brothers. So they all come to Earth, Ki, and set up gardens and bases for themselves by their ships to terraform Earth. They had a race of beings called the Igigi that were doing those terraforming work for them of setting up rivers and working the land for 3,000 years, is what the tablet says. And then one day they got sick of it and said, that's enough. We're not doing this anymore. They burnt all their tools and they marched up to Enlil at night and said, listen, we're done. Anu hears it. He's like a god in this sense a lot of times in the tablets where he hears the commotion and he comes down to ask what's going on. He's like, we're done with this. It's too much. We're not doing this anymore. You got to do something else. The work is just too much. This is the work of the gods. We're not doing it for you. And he's like, all right, well, fine. Sounds like you're right. And then the Anunnaki, they get together and they have a council and say, well, now that the Igigi are done, what are we going to do about this? Um, Enki winds up throwing out the idea, well, let me create a man. Let's create a human who can do the work for us. And there was another god, I forget her name, starts with an N, and she's like, okay, yeah, we could create a human, we could create a man. Um, I could do that with the clay and mixing it with the blood of a god. So let's sacrifice a god, Kingu. So this goes on and they're like, all right, cool, let's do that. And as she's creating the human, she's like, let let us hear the drum for the rest of time. And that way, from the flesh of the God, let a spirit remain. To say that they'll hear that drum beat and remember from where they came, like the heartbeat is how I interpret that anyway. So when I look at this story, I also kind of like to reflect on the idea that humans were born out of a time of revolt from previous gods being assigned to do this really hard labor for a really long time. And this race of beings stood up and said, we're done. And the Anunnaki were like, okay, well, let's create a human then. So I think that's kind of a cool perspective for the times that we're in. And you can kind of look at the human creation story being grounded in both the material world and then out of this like mythical inheritance of rebellion and divine responsibility, right? This God was sacrificed and mixed with the clay of the earth. So when we look at this with regard to grounding, what parallels can we draw then? How do we want to use this with a grounding idea? But when we look at this story and look at being mixed with clay, we can see that there's a special connection to the earth and the cosmos, right? This race of beings that weren't from here, but that drumbeat remains for humans to remember, and that we were made from the earth. So humans really become this bridge between the wisdom of the mind and a way that it connects into the earth. And this is also represented in other mythical teachings and mysticism teachings. So as we work as this, as humans, work as this octave between Earth and the cosmos, we really can work and look at the human body, human energy body, or human consciousness as a way to pull cosmic consciousness down into the Earth conscious realm. We ground that knowledge, ground that wisdom down into the Earth realm for her to then use. So, what do you guys think? Do you think that this translation should be this literal, that humans were made from the blood of a god Kingu and it was mixed with clay of the earth? Or do you believe in the genetic stories that were happening all over the planet with various alien races like reptilians and other beings like Lyrans, even that came down to ancient Earth? What do you guys think? We'll keep going here a little bit, but I just wanted to provide that perspective with grounding specifically. And I think, regardless of whether you want to believe that blood being mixed with the actual clay of the earth, as is outlined in this tablet, that there's still something very real about the biological layer of the planet and human consciousness specifically, being able to take these archetypal influences from the sun, the planet Uranus, um, Neptune, and Mercury, right? All in kind of these retrograde states right now. But looking at what that really means to be a physical being and grounding that down into the planet. Right, so next, let's talk about spiritual grounding using the chakra systems and elemental wisdom. So the human chakras, the seven in the body, are often associated with planetary alignments as well as neural clusters in the body. And in that way, they have a certain frequency and energy to them. So there's a very strong tie here between these ancient systems of like Vedic astrology and the chakra system and the cosmic energy and archetypal planet energies at play. So you can see this trend or theme coming up throughout history. And I'm really of the opinion that when something lasts the ages and thousands of years, like there's a reason, right? You're not going to keep the terrible recipe that you hate to eat and that doesn't nourish you. You're not going to keep it 1,000 years. You're going to get rid of that one and grab one that really sustains you, right? So I think this is a time-tested knowledge that's really sustained um, a lot of different generations. But when we talk about spiritual grounding and at Sovereign Rain from a perspective of like being trauma informed, we always start with the root chakra. You always want to ground knowledge into this reality. You live in this reality as a human. It's fun even to explore these other realms, but you do not want to break into a level of psychosis or schizophrenia, a split of the mind and body. You want unification and integration. So you always start at the root chakra. In modern chakra systems or new age systems, there's another chakra below that, the Earth Star Chakra. So when we look at grounding into the planet and working with these cosmic energies coming in through the body and grounding down into new grid lines you might be working on, new DNA knowledge you might be pulling in, like code language, you might be grounding in to the planet or into this reality at this time. We can also speak to the Earth Star Chakra as one of our like ethereal grounding points. And this is another form of elemental magic. So last episode, we talked about I believe it was last episode, we talked about the element of wind and how wind was really the most powerful, often regarded as the most powerful element because it is the power of thought. So here today, we're really focused on more the root chakra, grounding into the Earth Star Chakra, the really terraforming of the planet and creation of the human. All right. All right. So let's get into the grounding health benefits and grounding of the body and look a little bit more at the physical side of things. And I did come across a health study that had some pretty good graphs and data on um, what grounding could do to reduce the blood clotting, decrease anxiety, reduce inflammation. But the most interesting part of this was reduced inflammation even in the brain, which also affects the types of brain waves that are produced and improved mood. And why this is I think most interesting to me is because I look at the mind as separate from the brain and this subtle energy of the mind consciousness that the brain is actually the processor for. So when we look at grounding as a way of improving the function of the brain so that it can access these other types of brain waves, you're really increasing efficiency, is a good way to say it of or the reach of the antenna. So if you were to attune a radio, or if you're millennial Gen X, when you move those rabbit ears on the TV, when you put that aluminum foil on the end and move those guys around to get that TV station just right, grounding here to me, when it says it can affect the types of brain waves that are produced, that means that we could reach into what is it, delta and gamma into those meditative states of brain waves and reach those different levels of consciousness that you can often do in meditation. So, what else do we need to know here? When we look at grounding the body, we need to look at the body as a biomechanical system. So you are a bioenergetic being or machine. It's a kind of a cold way to say it, but you look at the biomechanical pieces as the tissues, the bones, and the muscles. And the electrical impulses that are running the body. So, what would those electrical impulses be? That heartbeat we talked about, right? Defibrillator is a shock of energy when people have a heart attack. Your breath is ran off of electrical impulses as well as your thoughts. So, when we pull that wind element into the physical realm, there's an electric impulse, right, of neuropsies? Ooh, okay, don't quote me, but right, neurons firing their electrical impulses. And you can look at grounding from a perspective of grounding an electrical system in this way and offloading those radical energies that can happen, stray energy, so energy building up around these electrical points. This happens in a house as well. If you want to learn more about that, I have an explanation on that in the app Lumist, our app Loomis, my app Loomis, if you wanted to read more or Google it, right, and look at the ground that's used on buildings or your house. So we could think of the human body a little similar in this way to say if we take some time to actually ground physically, we're offloading any of the static buildup of energy that happens in the body and radical energy. Radical energy is specifically dangerous because it can become destructive. So offloading this destructive type of energy into the ground. She's gigantic, and electricity, like water, wants to take that easiest path. So we step onto the earth, it's giant sink that draws that stray energy down. It wants a place to go. So it's going to naturally flow like a current, right? A current of electricity into the planet. Okay, so that's how we look at um, grounding of the physical body. And then remember the more spiritual aspect maybe of the Earth Star Chakra. So, how this subtle energy system of the chakras and the archetypal energies, the consciousness of these other types of consciousness, archetypal consciousness of the planets, can ground down into the Earth Star Chakra. And we can also do that physically with touching the planet with our feet, walking barefoot, and things of that nature. My favorite way to do grounding is with tree grounding. I love sitting up next to a tree, putting my feet on the ground and putting my hands on the roots. And I do like to typically find a pretty large tree. And it was actually one of my more magical experiences during some of my healing that I've done previously. So it's a pretty cool video if you haven't seen it. I call her Grandmother Oak. She is a big grandmother oak tree in Austin, Texas. Super cool. But do you do tree grounding? Let me know. I would love to hear what types of trees that you maybe do your grounding practices with. And what experiences you have had that way. I call them tree spirits. I've also met tree guardians while I was hiking out in Arizona. There is a tree called the heart tree. And I think that this is just something that's kind of innate to humans. We do seem to have a sense of the natural world, even if you don't want to call it, an elemental magic type of being like a tree spirit. It does seem to be something that resonates with humans while we're out walking in nature. And I do have maybe I'll pull these posts back up again and pin them on my socials so they're easy for everybody to get a hold of. But let me know the different types of ways that maybe you do a physical grounding practice. You can do this by also sun gazing at the same time. You could combine all three if you wanted to do a sun gazing, a grounding, and a tree grounding, all of those all at that same time. And I do have more information on the Earth Star, what I call an Earth Star chapter. Um, that's that's coming out with Sovereign Energy. That's my healing course for trauma. But maybe I'll open that up and I'll make that free. I guess if you guys are interested in that, let me know. That would be on the Lumist app. It would be free to sign up, and we could open up that Earth Star chakra chapter to give people a feel of what's going on there. But all right, to close out our discussion here on grounding practices for starseed survivors, let's look at some of the ways we could work within our modern world and maybe incorporate what we could call like modern rituals to do grounding practices and, still look professional or keep ourselves safe with some products that have come out. So one of them is a grounding mat. This would be really good if you're like even at home, if you wanted to put one in the kitchen while you're cooking, or if you had a standing desk at home, if you have an office that could kind of tolerate that with whatever clients or customers you have, you could use a grounding mat at work as well. Um, and a grounding mat too, you could maybe even double up with grounding socks. So if you had to wear like work shoes, maybe you keep your grounding socks on. Or there are even different types of grounding shoes these days that are pretty decent. So maybe you could find a pair that would be good for like your professional settings, so that if you had a space for a grounding mat and a standing desk, you could be doing grounding while you were at work, taking calls or doing things like that. One of the brands I found that was pretty good was a Harmony 783. So I'll drop their information below in the description as well. Let's see. There's another type of grounding mat. You could get a grounding mat for your chair, so like your office chair. You could get a grounding mat for your bed if you wanted to lay on a mat. Um, as an option, and then maybe have your mat that you could move around to your couch or like your lazy boy even, or your office chair if you only wanted to buy one product and look at being like budget efficient in that way. But one product that I do like and that I do use is a grounding sheet. And with that, I found one that has a cord that you plug into the ground of the outlet. And again, there's more information on this online. Google the outlet plug, but you want to plug into the ground of your house with these grounding mats or with the grounding sheets. So if you're using products inside, even in your office space, you want to understand the outlets that you have in your house and in your office. If you have an older house that's 1910, 1900s, 1800s, you do want to look into your electrical system. If you don't have the little round plug on your outlet, you don't have a ground to plug into. So do understand and take caution with these products and make sure you know what you're doing, because older houses weren't required to have a ground wire in the electrical systems. Um, and some old houses, they would ground into the iron pipes, which had lead. And we've recently moved to PVC. So if you have an older house that's had some plumbing repairs and has PVC, you might have actually cut some of those grounds. So you do want to understand what you're working with. If you're like 1970s, and sooner on the builds of your office buildings or your house, you'll be good. But do understand what you're doing here. You don't want to get yourself electrocuted or just cause a dangerous electrical situation. So we were talking about a grounding sheet. I found one where it has a little banana plug type of connector. You can plug right into the ground in your outlet. Or if you have the older homes, you can actually get a cord that attaches to the sheet and you can run it out a little side window and plug it into the ground. So it's like a big grounding rod that you stick right directly into the ground. And this would be similar to the grounding rod your house would have. If you're interested in that, again, look at the app Loomis in there. In Sovereign Energy Theory, I go through more about the electrical system on the house and how you can find the grounding rod of your house if you're curious about that. And just take a look for yourself to see what's going on. All right, there were some other products here with honorable mention. There's grounding blankets. These can really help with some anxiety relief and calming the nervous system. All of this is really going to help anchor your body during these um, any emotionally charged periods, but stressful day, right? You come home from traffic, maybe. Anybody been in traffic for 2 hours or 4 hours because there was a accident? These are a grounding with even grounding products is a good way to reset and just offload that energy and stress from maybe a commute home or from a bad work day or a good work day that was stressful. That can happen too. All right, we mentioned grounding shoes. They come in flip-flops and tennis shoes, as well as the grounding socks, just to help um, with connection into the shoe as well. So, what do you guys think? Was this a interesting take on grounding for Starseed survivors and a different way of looking at how we can use grounding to pull in the cosmic consciousness and um, really look at how we can take a role even in our modern times with some of these modern products and how that might look for us to play even a small part in helping define these new systems, whether they be biological, natural systems, or, offloading energy so we can step into our workplace and influence the more structural systems that humans have in place in our society. So I'd love to hear what you guys think about this. This was a really cool venture and research for me to dive into, and where I've started placing just some of my spirituality in the larger system of the cosmos and looking at how that interfaces with my natural draw toward trees. So, yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know if you'd like to see that free chapter of the Earth Star Chakra. And all of this is in preparation for Sovereign Energy. That is a full 8, 9 week course that looks at healing your traumas through the chakra system. Earth Star Chakra all the way up to Star Soul Chakra. I don't know anybody else that's teaching that level of trauma healing. Sovereign Energy will be launching here in about 4 weeks. It's a way of clearing out what is the clown chakra. Yes, you heard that correctly. The clown, like a clown with balloons, clown chakra. And another way you could look at that is the golden light body. And really getting resolution on your subconscious traumas that might be driving your belief systems and your actions. And if you're from a really traumatic background or have traumatic experiences in your life, this is one of the most efficient ways that I have found to do it. And I really love how I've been able to overlap it with the elemental side of nature, the elemental magic, elemental beings, but really pulling this level of healing, spiritual healing, down into physical form. So that's what this episode was really geared toward, laying a foundation here for the next 3 weeks. I'll dive into a little bit more information about the clown chakra so you can all get familiar with that. And yeah, that will look at narcissistic personality, psychopathy a little bit. It will step into a little bit ideas too of these archetypal energies of the clown, the trickster, the fool, the magician. How do we play these roles um, throughout our life, and specifically at Sovereign Energy, or in the course specifically for Sovereign Energy at Sovereign Rain, we talk about trauma informed mysticism. So as I go through grounding here with spiritual levels of healing, spiritual resolution. When I look at the crown chakra, the fool and the magician, those will also be coming from a perspective of trauma informed mysticism. So stick around, hit subscribe, follow us on socials. We're going to be pushing out more content for that Sovereign Energy course that'll be launching here in July. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.